Oraine Johnson was standing outside Dorset's Bridport Arts Centre when officers targeted him. According to Johnson, police drove by, stopped their car, then accused him of looking like a drug dealer. The 32-year-old was an actor, about to perform in a May 2017 production of Sorry, No Coloureds, No Irish, No Dogs, which was aimed at galvanizing debate on institutionalized racism and unconscious bias. Police officers in Dorset frequently suspect that black men like Johnson deal drugs. In fact, if you are black and in Dorset, you are 26.5 times more likely than a white person to be stopped and searched for drugs, and 20.4 times more likely to be targeted. The incident Johnson describes happened 3 years after Theresa May, then Home Secretary, told Parliament that the misuse of stop and search was unfair, especially to young black men, and unveiled a package of reforms to correct long-standing ethnic disparities. Her intervention on such a divisive issue signaled her ambition to be seen as a more liberal, inclusive Home Secretary who was not afraid to take on the police. Yet a comprehensive new analysis of the criminal justice system reveals such reform has failed to address racial bias. Rather, it documents a disquieting increase in ethnic disparity in the policing and prosecution of drug offenses. The disproportional use of stop and search is now at its most pronounced since the power was introduced in 1984. The analysis reaches a troubling conclusion. The criminal justice system in England and Wales is increasingly weighted towards a fictitious narrative that drug use is especially prevalent among black and minority ethnic groups. Published today by the London School of Economics and Political Science (LSE) and Stopwatch, a coalition of academics, lawyers, civil society organizations, along with Release, a center of expertise on drugs and drugs law, the study reveals that black people were stopped and searched at more than 8 times the rate of white people in 2016-17. All 43 forces in England and Wales targeted black people using stop and search at a higher rate than white people. Rebecca Del Sol, co-author of the 88-page report, called for the introduction of legislation to curb the use of stop and search. Forces that cannot use stop and search fairly and effectively should have the powers taken away from them until they can show that they can be trusted to use these powers appropriately. She added, the police are clearly unable or unwilling to deal with the problem and a solution needs to come from elsewhere. It is shocking that the situation has got worse, not better. The analysis also shows that stop and search is increasingly used to find drugs, with almost 2/3 of stop searches targeted at illegal substances, up from half in 2010-11. But this increased focus has meant that black people were stopped and searched for drugs at almost 9 times the rate of whites, despite data that white people are likelier to be found carrying drugs. The fact that the find rate for drugs is lower for black people offers proof, say experts, that such searches are conducted on the basis of weaker grounds for black people. Further down the criminal justice system, and against a backdrop of mounting calls to decriminalize cannabis possession, black people were convicted of cannabis possession at almost 12 times the rate of white people, the analysis found. It also reveals that black people made up 1/4 of those convicted of cannabis possession, despite making up less than 4% of the population. The proportion is even more striking as it is considered that black people report using cannabis at slightly more than half the rate of white people. Overall, more black people were prosecuted last year for cannabis possession than the supply of Class A or B substances combined, with the balance reversed for white people. Zoe Carr, another author of the report, stated, "This is an appalling indictment of the criminal justice system, which is acting as a conveyor belt for the criminalization of young black people for low-level offending, while treating white people more leniently for the same offenses." Elsewhere, the data, also examined and collated by the LSE's International Drugs Policy Unit, which works closely with governments on the issue, reveals that black people were sentenced to immediate custody for drug offenses at 9.1 times the rate of white people. The findings of the study are likely to prompt renewed calls for a new approach to challenging racial inequality in the criminal justice system. Although May's parliamentary promise in 2014 preempted a sizable reduction in the use of stop and search, the number of arrests of black people for drugs has not fallen, according to the research. Neve Eastwood, executive director of Release, said, "If Theresa May is serious about tackling racial disparity in the criminal justice system, then she has to address drug law enforcement, which she has abjectly failed to do. In London, disproportionality is highest in boroughs of extreme inequality. In Kensington and Chelsea, a black person is 6.9 times more likely to be stopped than a white person, compared with 1.8 in Newham, one of the capital's most multicultural boroughs. This pattern is consistent with ethnic profiling because it indicates that black people are being singled out for suspicion," said the report. Stop and search also accounts for a much larger proportion of arrests of black than white people, 17% compared with 5% for all offenses, and 57% compared with 31% for drug offenses. Such disparities, said the study, indicate that the disproportionate application of stop and search is a function of policy and decision-making rather than crime. Localized decision-making has also led to dramatic variations regarding the focus on drugs, with 82% of stop and searches in Merseyside authorized for drugs compared with 46% in Durham, the lowest proportion. Despite accusations that stop and search penalizes black and other ethnic minorities, some, including the head of the Metropolitan Police, Cressida Dick, have recently called for its deployment to be increased.